The battlefield was not of mud and blood this time. It was not a plain where cannons roared or skies that rained arrows. It was something far crueler, something unseen, a land of silence. Silence so heavy, so oppressive, that it pressed down on the chest of every soul who lived in its shadow. It was the kind of silence that crept into dreams, smothered laughter, and left behind a lingering weight, as though the air itself carried sorrow. In the ruined town of Seriphus, silence ruled like a tyrant. The once proud walls stood like broken teeth gnawed away by fire and time. Streets that had once glowed with markets and music were now nothing but paths of dust and stone. Children had once run across those cobblestones, their kites dancing in the wind, their marbles clicking against stone in carefree games. But now only the wind played there, whispering against hollow windows and rattling shutters that clung to life like old bones. The echoes of laughter were gone, replaced by the sighs of despair that even the living no longer spoke aloud. Through these ruins walked a man, not in uniform, not as a soldier of an army, but as a remnant of a past too heavy to abandon. His name was Adrian Kane. Once, he had been a decorated officer, a man whose voice carried across battlefields, steady and commanding. He had led men with courage, his medals glinting not from vanity, but from sacrifice. Now, however, there was no uniform on his back, no shining medal upon his chest. There was only dust, silence, and a memory that clung to him as tightly as his own shadow. Adrian walked slowly, as though each step measured a distance not of ground, but of memory. He did not look for enemies. He looked for something else, something taken from him in the last war. He searched among ruins not for gold or victory, but for fragments of himself. His war was no longer against armies, not against enemies who bore flags and weapons. His war was against something far more relentless: memory. Against the ghosts that rose unbidden in his mind. Against the silence that followed screams too loud to be forgotten. Against the weight of loss which no weapon could fight. The last battle haunted him most. He remembered it with the clarity of a nightmare, the sky darkened by smoke, the ground trembling under the march of boots, the chaos of men shouting commands, prayers, and final words. He had seen comrades fall, one after another, their lives cut short before his eyes. The enemy had come in endless waves, and the world had turned into fire and steel. When he awoke afterward, the battlefield was still. No roars of cannon, no cries of men, only smoke, ash, and the oppressive stillness of death. He had survived, though he could not understand why. Doctors called it fortune, but Adrian did not believe in fortune anymore. For what kind of fortune left him alone, deaf to the world, surrounded by graves? Yes, the silence was not only around him, it was within him. The war had stolen his hearing. No birdsong, no voices, no footsteps reached him. The world had become a vast stage where everything moved but nothing was heard. The silence was both curse and companion. It robbed him of music, of laughter, of comfort. Yet in that silence, he noticed things others ignored. The trembling of hands when someone lied, the shadows in a child's eyes when fear lingered, the way grief bent a man's shoulders more than age ever could. Adrian Kane became, in time, a listener, not with ears, but with eyes and heart. The people of Seriphus, weary and broken, gathered around him, not because he promised victory, but because he understood. He carried silence like a scar, and in his silence, he made room for theirs. They trusted him, because he did not demand words they could not find. Still, his own heart remained a battlefield. At night, when the moon hung pale above the ruins, he would sit among the broken stones and feel the weight of everything he had lost. The silence pressed harder then, filled with the memories of fallen brothers, of a world that had burned away. His war had no end, because memory could not be defeated, it could only be endured. Yet even in his brokenness, Adrian remained standing. Though he carried silence like armor, though his ears heard nothing, he still walked the streets of Seriphus with the posture of a soldier. His war had changed, but he fought still, not against men, but against despair itself. For in the silence of a ruined world, even one steady heartbeat could sound like hope. Adrian had fought in the Great Divide, a war that split nations, families, and even the hearts of those who survived. He had led men into battles where screams filled the skies, but in the end, the silence was worse. He remembered the last battle vividly. The enemy had come in waves, endless as the tide. His comrades had fallen one by one, until all that was left was smoke, gunpowder, and silence. When Adrian awoke among the ashes, there was no victory, no defeat, only the void of absence. The doctors said he was lucky to survive. But what kind of luck leaves you surrounded by graves? His ears still rang, not from sound but from the lack of it. The war had stolen his hearing. The battlefield had grown quiet, not because the world had become peaceful, but because Adrian could no longer hear it. Deafness was a prison, but in that prison, Adrian found a strange kind of clarity. He saw things others ignored: the trembling of hands, the shifting of eyes, the way grief bent a man's back more than age. The people of Seriphus, broken and scattered, gathered around him not because of his past victories, but because he listened, even without ears. He listened with his eyes, with his heart, with the silence he carried. And so, a different war began. A war to rebuild. A war fought with nails, wood, bread, and hope instead of rifles and grenades. But even in peace, shadows lingered. For the old soldiers of Seriphus, silence was not peace, it was memory. One evening, while Adrian walked through the ruins, he saw a child sitting alone on the steps of a crumbled church. Her hair was tangled, her clothes torn, and her face smeared with ash. Yet her eyes were fierce, like embers refusing to die. Her name was Leora. She did not cry, though she had every reason to. Her family was gone, her home reduced to rubble. But when Adrian reached out a hand, she stared at him with suspicion. "You can't hear, can you?" she mouthed. Adrian nodded. "Then you won't hear me crying at night," she whispered, almost as if relieved. Adrian didn't need to hear. He simply sat beside her in the silence, and for the first time in years, Leora felt she wasn't alone. Peace is fragile, and silence can be broken. Word came that raiders, remnants of the defeated armies, were moving across the land, plundering what little was left. The people of Seriphus looked to Adrian. Though he could not hear, he still carried the aura of a soldier. But Adrian had promised himself never to pick up a weapon again. Instead, he trained the townsfolk. He showed them how to stand guard, how to defend their homes with strategy, not brute force. Leora, too, stood among them, determined to fight for the only place she had left. When the raiders came under the cover of night, they expected fear and surrender. What they found instead was resilience. The people of Seriphus fought, not with fury, but with unity. And though Adrian never fired a shot, his silent commands, his hand signals, and his unyielding presence turned the tide. The raiders fled, defeated not by soldiers, but by survivors. After the raid, Seriphus became more than ruins. Gardens bloomed where graves had been. Laughter slowly returned, though Adrian could not hear it. Still, he could see it. The way shoulders lifted, the way eyes brightened, the way life returned in gestures. Yet inside him, a different war raged. He still carried the weight of the battlefield, the faces of fallen comrades, the echoes of a war he could never escape. His silence was both his prison and his gift. One night, as he sat under the broken bell tower, Leora asked him, "Do you miss the sound of the world?" Adrian thought for a long time before answering. He wrote on a piece of paper, "Sometimes. But silence has its own voice, and it reminds me to listen to what others cannot say." Years passed. Seriphus was rebuilt, stronger than before. Children grew up not knowing the war, but hearing stories of the silent commander who had led without words. Leora became one of the leaders of the town, teaching the next generation not just how to fight, but how to endure. And Adrian, though his hair turned white and his steps slowed, remained the heart of the people. His battlefield had been different, not fought with guns or blades, but with patience, resilience, and silence. When Adrian finally lay down for the last time, the town gathered. No speeches were given. No trumpets were blown. They honored him in the only way that fit, by standing together in silence. And in that silence, the world felt whole again.